She recently celebrated her 20th anniversary with the Columbia Police Department. Congratulations. Sworn into her position as chief on December 4th, 2023, she is Columbia's first female police chief. Starting in 2005, Chief Schlulde has served as a Columbia police officer, police sergeant, deputy chief of police, and assistant police chief. Chief Schlulde has a Bachelor's of Arts in Criminal Justice Administration from Columbia College and a Master's in Strategic Leadership from Stevens College. Her additional professional development includes completion of the Senior Management Institute for Police at Boston University, sponsored by Police Executive Research Forum, or PERF, which I think we've heard of. Welcome, Chief Schlulde.
Hello. Well, I am not one that's much on structured like PowerPoint things because I think we all sat through a billion of those in our lifetimes. If I had that time back, I'd probably appreciate it. But so I would just love to answer questions. I'll give you my little kind of opening spiel with the things that I get asked about a lot. And then I just love to take questions from people. One of my favorite things is debunking rumors that concern the police department. So that's the public information officer part of me, I think. So question I get super frequently is about staffing. So we have 185 sworn positions in the police department. That is from me on down to the very newest patrol officer. So we have about 15 vacancies right now. So we're at about an 8% vacancy rate. We had about 40 vacancies when I was sworn in. So we've been really steadily chipping away at that. It was actually lower, but we actually got some positions added in the budget this year. So I've got some positions to fill. And then we also moved some positions around, and it's kind of super nerdy, boring municipal stuff. But the jobs of airport public safety officer and parks officer were not really part of the police. They were, but they weren't part of the police department. They weren't Columbia police officers. They were other sworn positions. And so we folded those into the police department because we're just having a really hard time hiring for a lot of those jobs. So we folded those into our ranks. So that kind of moved the numbers around. So don't freak out when you see our number went in fiscal year 25 from 194. Now we're at 185. It's really just shuffling around a lot of those airport positions because we only do actual police service at the airport now. Prior to this, I was having to supervise firefighting operations and FAA regulation, and I don't know anything about either of those things. So we were able to start kind of splitting that position off. And frankly, now that the airport is getting bigger and we're experiencing the new terminal's great, more flights, we really need to police do police stuff, firefighters do firefighter stuff, and everybody's a lot happier that way. So that's kind of my little canned speech about where we're at as far as staffing right now with the positions that we have allotted. So I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
What about the park ranger? Did you lose it or did you keep
Yeah,
it?
so we kept it, but what we did was we really eliminated the title of park ranger, and that was actually a different job under a separate pension system. So we rolled that into the police department, and now it's a specialty assignment like detective or school resource officer. So it's just another assignment officers can apply for.
And it had different minimums to some extent
Yes.
anyway.
Yep.
So this point, you're going to do more self-training or send people, but you can also use other staff if need be.
And really one of the great parts about it was those folks are in higher pay rate because they're Columbia police officers instead of park rangers.
Yes.
So that was another reason we were having trouble recruiting, was because they're like, hey, I kind of wear the same uniform. I'm carrying a gun. What's the difference? And we're like, good question. So we just folded those jobs into, and so now eventually we'll have 4. Right now we have 3. So probably after the first of the year, we'll have all 4 in there, but if you haven't seen them, currently, one of them's on military leave right now, but Raquel Moritz and her partner and I can see his face and his name is just, this is probably a bad thing about getting old. Yes, he is. They are out there together. They actually worked day shift together for a long time, so they both kind of wanted to do this job together. But they have been doing a lot of, and really working in the park is just as much a PR job as it is policing job. So I think it's a great option for people to have at the police department.
Is that who I saw on the Grindstone Trail driving?
Probably.
Yeah, that
Yep.
was great to see.
Yep. We're trying to, hopefully the idea would be to add, get a couple more UTVs so they can be out there on the trails and kind of move a little bit more freely in the parks. So that's what we're hoping to work towards.
Yeah, it was great to see. But I live out of the city limit. I live in El Chaparral, and there's a trail not too far from where I live that goes underneath underneath Broadway 63.
Yep.
And it also goes as far as past St. Charles. Do you go over there too, or?
Yeah, any and all of the trail systems in the city, we patrol all of the parks, the fairgrounds. So I anticipate that probably being something that will need to expand over time.
Yeah.
We get a little bit of a reprieve when it's really cold, but there are still some hardcore folks that are out there at the dog park and things like that. But we also, there's a lot of special events in city parks. And so that's another staffing aspect we have to consider. So when we have things like art in the park, that's obviously a group of folks that can automatically go in, and that's kind of their assignment for the day. So kind of helps us man special events that are in the parks as well.
When there is a mental health call, how is that handled?
Oh, well, that's a really broad topic. So there's a lot of different things that we get called to. So really, when we get called to, I would say the garden variety type mental health calls, someone obviously calling the thing they're considering harming themselves. And so we'll respond to those calls as appropriate. And number one, talk to them about, depending on what they're talking about, have they taken any steps? Do they have a plan? Is this a pattern of behavior for them? Then we look at the situation, and we can fill out an affidavit to involuntarily take someone to the hospital, but we have to be able to articulate that they are a danger to themselves or another person. And so that's a higher threshold than most people think. And obviously we just don't want to be grabbing people and throwing them in the hospital. So we're very deliberate about when we do that. So in the absence of them going to the hospital, there's a lot of other services we can connect them with. So one of the great tools we have right now is Burrell has a 24-hour voluntary drop-off center. And so we've been utilizing that more and more. Excited about some of the things they're doing with addiction recovery locations. I think that'll be helpful for us. But we do a lot of mental health type training in the academy, and then ongoing, and really a lot of times that just boils down to good communications training, and being observant and empathetic and listening to people. And so thankfully, I think that skill set is more embedded in the generation of police officers we're seeing now. And so that's a little bit easier to teach. But those are pretty regular calls. And one of the questions I get a lot is, and you probably still see, there's still obviously tragic things that happen surrounding these calls, but many years ago, CPD took the approach that if someone is alone and threatening to kill themselves with a gun, something similar, we will not force our way into the house. And in the old days when I started, you'd get SWAT called out there, and we'd surround the house, and eventually we'd kick the door in, and then inevitably, the person does go ahead and kill themselves, or they point a gun at a police officer, and then the police officer does it for them. And so thankfully we really looked at that and said, hey, we probably should take a different approach to this. So many situations, if someone's alone, we will try to get them on the phone with a crisis negotiator, then hopefully get them to voluntarily come and go to mental health treatment. And if we just exhausted those options, we just walk away from it. We don't want to force that issue and make the situation worse than it already is. So that's just kind of I think a positive law enforcement tactic.
You don't have a social worker.
No, we do
But
not.
it sounds like the police are trained.
We have quite a bit of training, and honestly, I think we've kind of went down this road and looked at, and for a while the city actually tried to hire several social workers that would be city employees, and they just couldn't pay enough, understandably. So with the amount of services, it feels like Burl, which they're going to change their name again, but I can't remember what
I
it's.
can't either.
But it's something better than Burl. I know that because I always say it wrong. Or it's like finally Meg and Steve Brightly. Well, it was Brightly, but it's going to be something else now,
Right.
too. So every time I see Megan Steen, she's like, reminds me, it's Burl like squirrel. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to, now I can forget that because it's going to change again. But they have really expanded their service line for us. And there also is 988 is helpful. We're starting to be able to, when someone calls into joint communications, they're able to peel off some of those calls so the police never have to be involved. So they can send them to talk to somebody, or they can send the mobile crisis team out, which is, we love that. So I think we're getting smarter about it.
Good. At one point, the sheriff's department had one person that took a whole lot of mental health training, and then they were to come back and educate. That was probably when, at least 20 years ago, it was probably when they were trying to get into that more. Do you have that kind of assignment now, or is it more widespread? That
Yeah.
you don't need it.
So when we started crisis intervention training or CIT training, it was like you had officers on the roster that were labeled, well, that's a CIT officer. And now we've really tried to incorporate that in all, so that everyone's trained that way. And we've kind of transitioned. CIT is a 40-hour program, and it's there's a lot in it about diagnosing mental health. That's not really our lane. We're not doctors. And so we've transitioned to more of, you mentioned PERF. PERF has a really great decision-making model that incorporates all these things about communication and tactics, and are we solving the problem? Are we assessing things? And then are we thinking about this again to try to come to a reasonable outcome? And so we try to incorporate those decision-making processes in, hey, let's get this person the help that they need. If you haven't heard, the city also has a divert program. So we pioneered that with the health department, and the nexus for that was there are so many services in Columbia compared to a lot of communities that as a police officer, you're overwhelmed with, okay, I'm encountering, Bob over here, and I went to Bob's house and I got called for this, but while I was there, I noticed, Bob lives by himself and it doesn't look like he's really able to take care of himself. And I didn't really see a lot of food in the house. So who do I call for that? Well, at one point they had a thing that folded up in their pocket that was like, and keeping up with that is nearly impossible. Organizations come and go. And so we said, how can we make it easier for the officers to connect people with services? So the health department employs, now they have two. When we started this, they had one, us, two social workers. And the officers can go onto their computer in their car, or they can do it on their phone. And they go to this desktop that's called Divert. And there's about 9 different categories. We try to really strip it down because it's hard to know, what does FACE do versus what does the Salvation Army do? What does Love Columbia do? And so we stripped it down into categories of, housing insecurity, food insecurity, mental health, juvenile issues. And so we just made it categories. So they click the categories, put some information in there. Then the social worker gets it on the back end, and they connect the person with the services and do all the case management. So the fire department has access to that, as well as does neighborhood services. So we've kind of, it's worked really well so far.
Go ahead, Molly.
I would like to learn more about, I read something about a change in the training academy.
Yeah. So for many years, in fact, I went to the Law Enforcement Training Academy through University of Missouri Extension. For many years, that's pretty much where everybody went in this area. And we had heard rumors over the past probably 5 or 6 years that the university was potentially looking at getting out of that program. It's not a big money maker for them. I would imagine there's a fair amount of liability in training people to be police officers, so I don't blame them there. And so we started talking internally, and we're looking around and going, okay, we need to hire 40 cops. Beyond that, we need to increase our staffing, which means more training. And then we have training needs in this community, and frankly, in an urban policing environment that a lot of places don't have. So a deputy in Osage County, Missouri has different training needs than maybe a Columbia police officer. I know because I called the Osage County sheriff's department once, and they had one deputy on. And that's a completely different way to approach law enforcement. So in Columbia, we do a lot of urban policing. We try to be, I think, very forward thinking. And so we recognized, for example, we got body worn cameras. We were the first city in the state of Missouri to fully implement body worn cameras in 2014, about 4 months prior to the Michael Brown incident. So we should have bought a lottery ticket when we did that, because that was great. You couldn't find a body worn camera after that happened. So same thing with tasers. But a lot of agencies can't afford that technology. And so understandably, academies that cater to a lot of different agencies, they don't want to take time teaching taser or teaching rifle training or things of that nature, because they're teaching people that are like, my agency doesn't have that equipment. So we started talking internally, and it's been a conversation for years at CPD about, should we just start our own training academy? And so the council and the city manager and the mayor were super supportive. We said, if it fails, we've got a fallback plan because LETI is still here. But frankly, we were able to attract 4 extremely tenured and knowledgeable former employees, a former CPD lieutenant and 3 sergeants who have done everything from the community policing unit to SWAT to being field training officers to narcotics to detectives. So they really cover the whole gambit. And I would say between the 4 of them, they probably have, they'll be mad because this will tell you how old they kind of are, but I would say between the 4 of them, they probably have about 120 years of police service. So you have some really knowledgeable folks who have seen a lot of change in law enforcement that want to come back after retirement and say, I want to be part of training the next generation. And that has made this, I think, a lot more successful because the kids, they're not all kids, but most of them, I feel like if I'm old enough to be your mom, you're a kid. So I don't use that word disrespectfully, but they see those guys as mentors. So even once they get out of the academy and they start in field training, and some of them, when they're on their own, they'll still call those guys and say, hey, Mr. Hedrick, I want to talk to you about this call. And so there really are kind of mentors. And I think it's really helped retention too.
Is there any relationship with the Lincoln University?
Yes. So as this gentleman well knows, you have to have a post-training license to have a training academy. And so we don't currently have that. And so we know Chief Hill at Lincoln University. A lot of us have worked with him and around him for a long time. And we knew he had successfully started an academy at Lincoln, which was pretty exciting because that was the first police academy to ever be at a historically Black college or university. So we approached him. He's like, absolutely, I'm on board. Let's do this together. He also manages an academy in St. Louis. And so he's been super supportive and helpful. And it's been a really good relationship.
Kirby had a question.
By the way, the university's program has always been targeted at the state minimum level. And that's the market that it aims for.
Right.
That's not you.
Sure.
You're somewhere here and a little below St. Louis County, St. Louis City. And the other question, I want to congratulate the department on dealing with so effectively with the recruitment problem, which is a statewide problem.
Yeah.
And in spots, a national problem. And it continues to be so. What have you been doing?
Really?
Can we institutionalize this?
Well, it's really been, and some of it, frankly, just feels like luck. But you look at, I went through the police academy at LETI in 1999. I'm going to tell myself now. But you had these kind of, marks in police history, at least since I've been involved in it, being obviously, Ferguson, being COVID, being, the incident in Minneapolis. There's all these different things that I think it felt like after 2014, about 2016, we started kind of coming out of that a little bit. We started recruiting some more. And then we got hit simultaneously with COVID and George Floyd incidents. And it was like it just bottomed out and it was awful. And so coming out of those things, it was really interesting because not only did we have to get people interested in the profession, we needed to prove the professional aspect of it. And we also needed to support those folks with the right pay. I think people who were willing to do it because it's noble were also like, okay, so let me get this straight. I'm going to be on the front page of everything if this goes wrong, and you're going to pay me what, an hour? And a lot of people were like, no, I don't think so. So, and that's understandable. So we took the approach that if we look at, and the council and the city manager, you know, whether you like him or whether you hate him, and there's opinions all over the map because his job's like mine, you know, the city manager has probably done more to back employee pay, equity, and raises than anybody that I've ever worked for in the city. We had just been saying for years, like, this is a problem. The pay plan is a problem. We're losing people, and you're always going to lose people in private industry. Mm-hmm. Government can't generally pay what private industry can, but there's other benefits you can offer, and there's a lot of you know, stability in government work. But it got to the point where we just couldn't keep anybody, and we were losing. Before we were kind of the premier agency, we started losing people to other agencies because we weren't keeping up with the pay. Mm-hmm. And so I think it was a multifaceted attack on the pay and benefits. We did the really first organized marketing campaign. The city manager approved for us to use some money. We had all kinds of personnel money left over because we had 40 vacancies. So I said, hey, can we have, you know, $125,000 to do formal marketing? So we hired a marketing firm. You probably saw me on your TV way more than you wanted to. I was on the radio. We did these really cool online ads. We did targeted ads at different academies and police departments. And so we've even recruited, we have officers here from Washington State, Arkansas, Illinois, Colorado, Florida. So we're really starting to attack it from all angles. And then I will honestly tell you, I think even more than we realized, having our own in-house academy has really changed the dynamic. Having those people feel like they are a member of our team and our family from day one, especially in a job that's really, really hard, is life-changing because we meet their families. I see their parents and their spouses at graduation. And so they realize from day one who we are. Whereas before they were spending 4 months with a bunch of other people. Mm-hmm. And then they like come here and their training officer would tell them, don't even listen to that. This is the way we really do it.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a little disheartening once you got out of the academy. We're like, oh yeah, I'm ready. And then they're like, no, you're not. You don't know anything. Mm-hmm. So I think it's been multifaceted. And I think, you know, our best salespeople are the people that work there. And I think they've worked really hard to get out there and tell people, hey, this is a good place to work. It's not perfect. But I've worked a lot of places too. And I know I'm old enough to know no place is perfect. So we just got to keep trying to make it better.
So, multi-part question.
Okay.
There's, in some communities in Columbia, a perception that our homeless population is the source of crime. So could you talk factually about how much crime can be attributed to our homeless population? And then we don't get too far off track, if you wanted to talk separately about what the department is doing to kind of help with the obviously growing, anyone's eyes can see, homeless population with the economy and the way things are going. Just more people are seeing housing insecurity. Do you want to add to the question? Let's make it more hard.
Well,
Let's
make
make
it
more
keep
difficult.
me on track and make sure I answer it all.
Well, yeah, it's fine. I think
Just let me be.
yeah. Okay. What is it, Sue?
Homeless is what's on the street, living on the street.
Yeah.
But that's not the unhoused.
Let's see.
And the homeless are the men. Almost, I bet I wouldn't be surprised if it's 90 or 95%.
Not anymore. Not anymore.
Okay.
Let's hear about it.
And are there children on this, that many? Okay. Because what I'm getting at, I think they keep talking about needing to work on the homeless, but our unhoused females especially with families they're just lucky enough to find a place and they know they can't it's so unsafe for the kids.
So we obviously get asked a lot, and I'm sorry,
Yes.
I admit the reading glasses
No,
age
do it.
now. So we get asked a lot of this question.
Uh-huh.
And the first thing I want you to know is it's extremely hard for us to track.
Yeah.
We just started this past week the process of getting a new records management system. A big push for that was it is almost impossible to get good data out of this current system we have now. And when you're trying to do data-driven based policing, that's really hard. And we need to have it in a way that can be deployed out to the officers really on a daily basis would be my preference. That informs them where they need to pay attention to in their areas of responsibility. And so that's the movement. That's the way we're moving. We got asked about this so much that several years ago, we decided, okay, well, how could we even try to track this? So the best way we could come up with, which is extremely flawed, is when an officer's on a call, they clear the call with a code in their car. And that code can be anything from I took a report, I made an arrest, I didn't take a report, it's a false alarm, it's a good alarm, all a litany of things. So one of the things we added a code for unhoused. What the idea was, hey, if you go on a call and the person that you're having to deal with was unhoused, that you would just put that in there and we would at least maybe try to pull that out later and then dig through the micro data of that call, what type of call it was, did they get arrested, things of that nature. I say that to say a human is involved. Mm-hmm. So a human has to get in there, pick that code, remember to pick that code, and do everything correctly for that to actually be cataloged. So I think this number is underreported because I'm sure everybody's not doing it religiously. That's just the way things are right now. Mm-hmm. So the last numbers I got with this is as of October 6th from my analyst were in 2025, up to October 6th of 2025, we had 2,736 calls that were categorized as dealing with unhoused folks. And of those, we made 410 arrests. Now, an arrest in our language could also be you got a ticket for trespassing and got a court date. That's pretty common, actually. The Boone County Jail does not like us bringing people out there on misdemeanor charges, and we kind of have a gentleman's agreement that we try not to do that unless it's a really domestic violence or something of that nature. Have some little chart. I have maps that show, where a lot of the different incidents are. Those would not surprise you. And then we broke down what the majority of the time the call is, and overwhelmingly it's trespassing. 85-6% of the time it's trespassing calls. And then you've got warrants, disturbances, things of that nature. So we spend a fair amount of time getting all kinds of calls because not all of them are the reason for the call is not always because, someone's trespassing on my property. We get a lot of calls about, hey, there's someone laying on the side of the road. They don't look like they're awake. And so nowadays you can't be too sure if somebody's overdosed or if they're asleep. And so we have to be very mindful of that. And so we get a lot of calls that we kind of term like check welfare, man down unknown problem. There's a lot of different ways it gets coded, but we spend a lot of time just kind of doing welfare check type calls. I think that's the first part of your question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just kind of how much of the crime is really being tracked to being caused by homeless people, and then also just your
numbers.
Yeah.
Out of all crime, how does that?
Yeah, so I would have to compare that number.
Also, what are we calling crime?
Well,
are we calling guns crime? Are we calling you walked across my yard and I didn't give you permission to crime?
I will admit I am like a kind of a crime stat nerd because it is the devil's in the details. And so we gave one of my staff gave a really great presentation on crime stats at the last pre-council meeting. So if you get the chance to go back and listen to it,
recorded.
It's great. And there's some attachments that you can look at that kind of explain it. But we have to always take into account that we only know the crime that was reported. Mm-hmm. So in our current crime system, we used to do UCR under FBI. In 2021, it was mandated you had to move to a reporting system called NIBRS, which is also under the FBI. But the whole idea was to get a better idea of actual incidents rather than the way things were being counted before, which was extremely inconsistent between jurisdictions and states, and what somebody else called burglary, somebody else called robbery, and it got super confusing. So they tried to herd all the cats and said, okay, if you want to keep getting federal money, you have to move to the system by 2021. We tried to transition in 2019. It wasn't a very great transition, so we ended up one of the positions that I got added my first year was we have somebody who just manages our records and data. That's her bread and butter. She did it in another department for 19 years in the suburb of Chicago. We were lucky enough to steal her away. Again, the pay thing does matter. And so she came here and she literally went back through an entire year of crime reporting to clean up all the numbers, which was no small job. I do not want that job. And so I feel like we need to probably get at least 3 years out to have any kind of meaningful look and trend. And so one of the hard things is too, if everybody's not properly categorizing a call as involving unhoused people, I could sit and look and go, well, we made this many arrests, but 410 were unhoused. But I don't think that's really accurate right now. And I'll be honest with you too, while I want to know that, I also remind people that we police behavior, not housing status.
Yep.
So whereas do I think we get a disproportionate of calls within that population? Sure, but I'm not super surprised by that. I mean, higher incidence of mental health and substance abuse and a lot of other things. And so that doesn't surprise me. It's just tracking it is a little bit harder than it should be right now.
And that's not necessarily violence against other people.
No,
And
there's been some pretty high profile, and again, that's where I'd like to better be able to speak from a position of confidence about, is it disproportionate? And I really couldn't say right now. When we have staff meetings at the police department, our command staff gets together, we meet every Tuesday for 4 hours. Sometimes it's 5 or 6 hours, but I try to get everybody out of there before dark, but that's harder nowadays with the time change. But we have these, we'll be talking and somebody will go, okay, I'm going to make an I feel statement. Because you're about to say something that you don't have like numbers to back it up. You say, I feel like this is happening. And so when we see a lot of things being reported, even within the police department, like, I feel like there's more of this happening. When you have, some of the assaults that have been reported, the gentleman that was killed by being set on fire, we've had some other pretty high profile things. It still starts to feel that way, but I want to really have the numbers.
Marty, I thought you were going to maybe add on to that question. Did your part of it get addressed?
Partly because of your description of the statistician that you now have working. It seems like too often people try to compare numbers without considering changes in the number of population. I mean, I have a public health background, and we always use rates for that reason. So if our community is twice as large as it was back in whatever day, then don't be surprised if we have twice as much crime.
Well,
But people see that as a
you segue me into something great, because we were having this conversation the other day. We did not plan this, I promise. But so when we talk about crime stats, and in the new reporting system, there's 3 categories. There's crimes against persons, crimes against property, and crimes against society. And so violent crimes are not necessarily crimes against persons. It's a more of a subset of that. And there's been some significant changes, like robbery is not counted as a crime against a person anymore. It's in the property category. So when you look, we have a great new website, a transparency portal for our data. It's a work in progress. It's not perfect yet, but I felt it very important for people to have as close to real-time access as I could get them to crime stats. And so we didn't have a great way to do that. If you go to Columbia Police Transparency, it should pop up as your first thing. And one of the most important things for people, and I get frustrated sometimes, a lot of times, let's be honest, especially when there's media reporting, because it is a really complex subject. It's not as easy as looking at a dashboard and going, this is up 5%, this is down 12%.
especially when you're only looking from one year to the next instead of looking at the 1980s.
And the very interesting thing is, so if you look at our crimes against society right now, it's up anywhere between 40 and 45%. And you'd look at that.
From what?
Right. So from last year.
Oh, just over the year.
So not quite doubled, but getting close. But when you realize what crimes against society are, by and large, they're crimes that are only counted if we detect them. So DWI, possession of narcotics, trespassing is kind of on the fringe of that. But there's a lot of those types of crimes, liquor law violation type crimes that are in there. And so when I tell people, hey, we have more staff, which means we're being more proactive. We're doing 3% more traffic stops than we were doing last year. We are going to detect more crime. This goes to my public health friends. Just because you're testing more people and getting more positives doesn't mean more people have whatever, right? Same thing with us. And so it's really hard to get people to understand that. You have to really kind of critically think about that. But when you see that number go up, I don't automatically go, oh my gosh, everything's on fire. It's that, okay, well, some of these aren't even counted under NIBRS. We don't even count something unless we made an arrest. And there was a report, a criminal report taken. And so that's a lot different from if you just map calls for service. The calls for service map is going to be everything under the sun, child custody, fraud, all these different things. And a call for service is a lot different than did somebody actually report a crime. So there's all kinds of things we get called about that are not crimes that we spend a lot of time on.
I have a quick question. And that is, I've known people and had people work where I have to go into Ward 1 or low income area.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things came to mind on me because I'm sensitive to are treating some people differently. Okay. And I'm thinking, if I go into those, I see the police cars. In my neighborhood, I don't. And if I have some car racing down the street, they don't get caught.
Mm-hmm.
But the same thing happens in an African American or whatever community, they get caught. And so it actively being there, and I hear that they still have to teach the 10 and 2 to their kids.
So one of the things I'll talk about staffing from a little bit different perspective. So I get asked all the time, well, how many officers do you think you need? Well, which metric do you need, right? And I look at it more from the perspective of my staff is going through an exercise where we say, okay, what services do we think we should be providing that we're not providing because of staffing constraints? So a good example would be, our hope is that when the current academy class goes through field training and is on their own somewhere around May or June of next year, when those 15 officers are out on the street, we'll be able to reconstitute the downtown unit. We had to do away with the downtown unit because of staffing considerations. We had to make a strategic decision because we couldn't have both a downtown unit and a traffic unit. I have one person in my traffic unit for a city this size right now. So he works all the fatality accidents. He responds to the lion's share of the traffic complaints. It should really be a 6-person operation. And so we're sitting down and going, okay, there's also types of crime that expanded exponentially. I mean, we had to send a detective to training to deal with crypto theft.
Oh boy.
And so you have things like that are really starting to become a thing. And when that means you have to have more detectives to deal with those things. Auto theft is a problem in this community. We really need a detective assigned full-time just to work auto thefts. But that takes capacity. And so the other issue is when you're 40 people short or when you're understaffed, your officers just spend all their time going from call to call to call. So in theory, the way a shift starts out at 6 a.m. is you have this map of the city. We have 8 beats and we have so many people per beat. And those beats are created based on calls for service. They're not based on population. We do them based on a continuous look at calls for service. So if a beat's really small, that's because it gets more calls for service. Downtown's a great example of that. So in theory, we have pretty much an equal number of officers assigned to all the beats. But when you don't have enough people, the chessboard starts out all nice and neat. And then as soon as things start getting busy around 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, I was supposed to be in the northeast side of town. Well, now I got sucked over into the central part of town because they didn't have enough people to handle this call there. And then I'm caught up there. Well, then somebody else from Southwest has to go to Northeast because there's a call up there. And so it's just like a madhouse all day long, when really the whole idea is to have enough officers to do what I call very generically, but is my true belief of community policing. That's just, you get the same officer at the same time of day in your neighborhood, in your business district, whatever that is, so that we have this relationship. So, oh, Jill's my beat officer, on Mondays and Tuesdays. And I know I can call her and go, hey, I got this concern. And we have that kind of relationship.
And also that officer knows what's normal.
Yes.
What's
And what's
normal
not
for that
normal,
area.
right. And so we just don't, that's what we're working towards. And I'll be honest with you, this is an I feel statement again, but I feel retention will go up when officers are less hurried and they're making those personal relationships, because I get to see folks like you all the time. People who say, thank you for the job you're doing. We really appreciate it. They deal with people all day long that are not in a good place.
Yeah.
And so when they get time to do that and they can get out of their car and go walk through your neighborhood, they see somebody mowing the yard going, hey, nice to see you. Can I get you a bottle of water? Or, thanks for being here, whatever. And that just tank that you need filled up as a public servant gets filled up more regularly. And it's not like I just went to mad person, to tragedy, to upset person, and that's what I did all day long. And now I come home and I'm like, now I got to deal with my own problems, because they do have lives outside of their work. So I think it will really continue to help retention the more we can get that, that feeling of this is my area. I'm responsible for the safety of these folks, and we're going to work together to make my area as safe as we can.
Let's go grab before I lose them. There's a
Sure.
couple questions in chat. Allison, quite a while back, asked, is there any way to anticipate that shooting, that very public promoted shooting that happened up at the Stevens
Yeah.
in downtown during homecoming, and then follow up when big crowds are expected with many from out of town and no really a way to screen for weapons? It seems like a formidable task to have somehow anticipated or prevented that. So do you want to address that?
Sure. So prior to homecoming, we had recognized a pattern in some violent incidents downtown. We had about an 18-month span of time where we had roughly 11 shootings downtown,
Mhm.
some fatal, some non-fatal. And so in June, we started deploying some more resources down there. And then again in July, we had another group of folks come out of training. And so we were able to create a third shift. Up to that point, we had 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. folks. We didn't really have anybody overlapping. So we added in a 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. shift, which really helped that staffing
Kind of bars are
over
letting
the
out.
bar closeout,
Yeah.
which we used to have that shift when we had more people. So by July, we had increased, I think, our staffing on patrol by about 20%.
Yeah.
And then we were also pulling in people from other beats just to come downtown and help.
When it got hot.
Yes. Now, game weekends are a totally different story. We post staffing. We have a lot of extra resources down there, but I think and I understand where it comes from, but I think there's this idea that if I had 200 more police, we could be on every corner and prevent every person from making a bad judgment, right? Whether that's they're going to drive drunk, or they're going to fire a gun, or they're going to, hit their girlfriend, or whatever it is. And I think there's a deterrent effect, certainly. Places like Memphis and other places like that are starting to, if you go in some of their nightlife districts, they have officers on every block and they have their lights on and they're very visible. And I think there's a deterrent effect, but I don't know how you measure it.
And how do you?
Right. And funding it is another thing. So I think you got to find this happy medium between what do we need to safely try to deal with the crowds and the problems we know we're going to have when people are using alcohol and marijuana and things of those nature, because they're just not making great decisions. But when you hear me talk about, and I talk about it pretty frequently, we don't have what I feel is the correct number of officers to provide the level of service I think we need for a city this size. Yep. Springfield's about 40,000 people larger than us. They have around, I believe, 365 officers. We have 185.
Sure. Wow.
So I just came back from the chamber trip in Columbia, South Carolina. They're very similar to us. Apart from the Capitol being there, they've got the schools right up against downtown. They have about 140,000 people. So they're only about 10,000 more than us. They have 380 officers. Mm-hmm. So we're just not, and I have a theory about that. And I think I've lived here since 1995. So if you've lived here a long time, my perspective on that is I remember when Rockbridge High School seemed like it was way out in the boondocks. And Walmart was like the edge of town down there. And so if you look back historically, we've looked back through the past 25 years of budgeting, And we just didn't have any years where we really made gains on adding personnel. And the problem is you can look back, and I think the highest year we added like 7 officers at once, maybe in the early 2000s. But to staff a 24-hour, 365-day operation, you've got to have 3 bodies really to make up for 1 on a 24-hour clock, because people get vacation time, they get sick, they go to training. And so when we added 7, we really added 2.33333, right? So I think at the time we're like, oh, great job. And it's good. But meanwhile, the city's growing by an average of 2% a year. We're now 70 square miles. So we have all this extra area to police. And I think kind of one of the factors behind that was Columbia's crime rate's always been really good. I mean, we've always looked at Springfield and been like, God, don't go live there. It's crazy down there, Kansas City or St. Louis. And so we just said, oh, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And then we woke up and we're like, oh my gosh, we're a city. We're a city, we're not a town anymore. And so now we have city problems. And that's everything from traffic and driving behavior to, you know, the violent crime aspect of this and gangs and things of that nature. That's all here. It's on our doorstep. And so I think a lot of people want to assign blame to one person, or it's this council, or it's that mayor, and this problem did not get created overnight. It's a 20, 30, 40 year problem. And I don't think it was intentional. I think it was just, hey, we're a great town. We've got a great university town, and we don't have a lot of, I mean, a high year for homicides here was 13, I believe. Springfield and Kansas City and St. Louis would be like, oh my gosh, this is a blue ribbon year for
If they got
murders.
13, yeah.
Yeah. And so we haven't had those issues, but I think we have to start being prepared for them, because you're just not going to have this many people in this density in a city. No, I don't know of any cities that just don't have city crime problems. It's just not possible.
Peter had a logical follow-up. We won't hold you to it, but just gut check. What would the right number be? If we've got 100 and whatever you said, and Columbia, South Carolina, and Springfield have 300 and blah, 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 like without just overdoing it and somebody every 10 feet.
Right.
What would be your ideal reasonable number if you had all the money in the world?
Yeah.
You could just hire people.
I
people
think
to hire.
So the exercise we're trying to go through right now is, number one, you know, the patrol job, the answering 911 calls and being in the beats is always the backbone and core of what we do. So we're trying to assess first, like, how many people do we need to really fulfill that mission? And I would love to get them off 12-hour shifts. I've worked an 8, a 12, and a 10. The 10 is really great middle ground, because when we worked 8s, it was like, you got a weekend off every 6 weeks. That's not going to attract applicants. Spoiler alert. So 10-hour shifts are great administratively as well, because when we did 10-hour shifts, we had an all squad training day on Wednesday. So everybody worked on Wednesday. So this group went to training, this group worked the street, and this group did a special assignment, like, okay, we're going to do school zone enforcement, or we're going to go out and we're going to look at this area that we're having complaints in about X and try to solve this problem. So I'd really like to get back to 10s. That requires more staff, because the more overlap you have, the more people you have to have.
Everywhere else, yeah.
But when you have overlap, you also get people off work on time more frequently, which is another driver of retention. So I think we're trying to come up with what we think that number is, as close as we can estimate. And then also tell the city, hey, based on what we're seeing with growth, and Columbia's never gotten smaller, at least not in the 25-year look back I did. So what can we project every year? And so how many officers should we reasonably try to add to the budget? And it's not just me. There's lots of other departments that are in the same boat. I feel like we just probably have a deeper hole to dig out of. So I think what we're trying to do right now is go, okay, we need this many on patrol, and we need this many detectives. I mean, for a period of time, up until probably the past 6 months, we had 1 detective working on all the property crimes cases in the city of Columbia. And I don't want that job. That sounds awful. So, and that's another job satisfaction thing, right? So I think we're going to try to be very mindful about what that looks like. And when you hear that number come from me, that is not me saying, well, if we had X number of cops, crime's great.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'm not that naive. No. My ask is going to be, this is the number of officers I think we need to provide the service level we're being asked to provide. So that's going to take some community conversation too.
Did we get a number?
I don't think I have a hard number yet. I'm getting close.
Range?
I would say if we're at 185 right now, I would say we probably need to be closer to probably 250.
Fair. Like I said, we
Yeah.
won't hold you to it. Just ballparking.
No, that would be my
Yeah,
ballpark
yeah.
right now.
You said 257 and now you're asking for number
Right,
258. How
right.
dare you? Yeah. Going way back and switching topics quite a bit. Dave, quite a while back, asked, have you been asked or conscripted to assist or participate in any ICE apprehensions?
Nope.
No, I haven't even been asked.
Nope, haven't even been asked. And so so people know our policy at the police department and our policies are online. And it's been this way ever since this even became a topic of conversation. We cannot legally and do not participate in civil immigration enforcement. So civil immigration enforcement, for people who don't know, is someone overstayed their visa or their green card is messed up for some reason. Kind of a lot of the things you're hearing about right now. We don't have the authority to be involved in that, and we just wouldn't be involved in it. That I parallel that to, that's different from if someone comes and says, hey, we have a federal arrest warrant for this person for robbery and carjacking, and they happen to be in the country, they're not in the country legally. Of course, we would help that law enforcement agency. It's a federal arrest warrant for a crime, an actual crime. That's way different than come help us round up all these people that don't have their visas or whatever. That's just, we have a lot better things to do.
These are quick ones. How many bicycle mounted police officers do you have?
That one's easy, 0.
Okay.
So that's another great, and so the crazy thing about that is it's not as simple as like, oh, I'm going to get out and ride my bike around today. We would love for it to be that way. One of the toughest schools you can go to is bike officer school. I have not gone to it, but I know people who have, and they were like, it's the most physically challenging because they make you do all these things right up and down the steps. You have to be able to jump off the bike at speeds and do all these things. And I was like, I'm not even sure I want you guys to do this. This sounds like people being off work. But I think we're looking at, we used to have segways downtown. So we're looking at some other options to really get people out there more out of the car. So I think there's a big need for that, but not against it. We have some police bikes and they do ride them around the neighborhoods sometimes when they get a wild hair. But my deputy chief, Matt Stevens, loves biking. He's a huge bike enthusiast. So don't be surprised if you see him on the trail in his police shirt because he loves that.
Do you lose officers? This is another online question. Who moved from your place to the MU Police Department? Conversely, can you recruit MU officers to come over to the city?
I think since in recent history, I can only think of one that left CPD to go to MUPD. Vice versa. I'm trying to think of the last time somebody came to us. And I would say, just like rural policing and urban policing are very different, campus policing is a different animal too. And so I think folks that work in campus police departments have to have a real heart for students. So they kind of like being parents too, in my estimation, because I work downtown on night shift. So I did a lot of parenting of people. And you really got to do that to the nth degree if you're a campus police officer. So I think sometimes people just view those jobs really differently. And so there's people who go, I would never do that, but I'll do this. If you are an MU cop, you also get a great tuition discount. So we have to kind of compete with that too. So
there's other motivations.
Yep.
Here's an interesting one. Peter, or maybe his dad online asked, how do we find out the status of old cases, like what is being done and what has been found out? Is there a...
yeah, if you email the police PIO email with as much specifics as you can. Yeah, I think it's all one word, police PIO at como.gov. And if not, I know for sure it's on the website. Yep. And give as many specifics as you can with date, any names involved. If you got a case number, that's great. We do put all the case numbers on our press releases. So if you have that as a reference, we try to usually do, if they're more visible cases or a case that we know is violent in nature or has a lot of public interest, we try to do follow-ups like when we make an arrest. We're not perfect at it yet. And by no surprise, the PIO office is understaffed as well. But that would be my best advice.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yep. Dave said yes. He would double check that. He thinks that's right. Mari.
This may be outside your bailiwick, but I don't know who else to ask the
Sure.
question of. I live on where I have to drive on Clark Lane
Mhm.
a lot. And it is so dicey with pedestrians walking on those on the bicycle paths.
Mhm.
And kind of living fear of accidentally hitting someone. But it strikes me that I don't know if anyone is teaching people how to be a pedestrian now. Is there anything
Yeah.
in the schools? Do the school safety officers do that? Because people will dress, people with very dark skin dressed all in black, walking not against the traffic, but in the same direction as the traffic. I mean, you see that all the time.
I don't know
Nothing
if it's taught.
reflective.
Yeah, I don't know if it's taught in the schools, but I can tell you, I'm almost positive since I have to go to all the city council meetings, so I know way more about planning and zoning and things than I ever wanted to know just from listening to it. I believe that sidewalk project is on the
Right.
bigger,
Yeah.
and I think that will help immensely.
It's also not the only place in town.
No,
where
it is
people-
not.
Where pedestrians just don't seem to know the
How to be a
basics.
walker.
I
How to
think-
be a walker.
I think there's a great opportunity there for the city, whoever that is in the city, to partner with like local motion. You know, we do Vision Zero, but I learned a lot doing this marketing campaign because the marketing people in the old days, you did like this super cool 5-minute video with all your toys and your police dogs and lights and driving fast and all this stuff. And they're like, nobody watches a 5-minute video on the internet anymore. I was like, really? They said, no, we have the data to prove it. So they said, it can't be more than 30 seconds. And so I think if we put together some very, short form, like, hey, did you know this is kind of how you should do this? And probably starting young would help. But yeah, I agree with you. There are some scary places people are walking where it's very dark. So lighting and sidewalks and kind of pedestrian education are certainly a thing.
Like 63 and 70.
Yes, that one
That
comes to
doesn't
mind
even-
as well.
There doesn't need a light for people.
No.
Herb, you know?
Another compliment for you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, but it's a compliment as the other one. It's a compliment, not just for you personally, but for the department. And that is you brought out your plans or your efforts to promote revision and modernization of your records acquisition and massaging operation. And more power to you. It is profoundly significant in all areas of the computer era. I want to work on that. But I want to say that you're doing some the good things are coming out of this department.
Absolutely.
Are you set up as the department to give counsel or informal advice to the many other law enforcement units around the state that I think could benefit from it?
I think policing is getting better than it used to be about being so siloed, but I also think the more like in Columbia, for example, we're kind of on a geographic island. And so whereas in Kansas City or St. Louis, you say, oh, well, Lee Summit's doing this or Blue Springs is doing that. And you have all these people to kind of innovate from and compare notes. For a long time, we were just kind of out here in the middle and we did some great things, but then I think we fell behind a little bit because we didn't have those natural peers around all the time. And so being involved in things like the International Association of Chiefs of Police, PERF, I think those are really helpful. And so we try to we're in a really good place right now locally because the Ashland Police Chief and the Centralia Police Chief both are former CPD employees. They're retired and became chiefs there. And so we regularly talk with them and are willing to help with them on a litany of projects. Missouri Police Chiefs Association is trying to do a better job of information sharing. They started kind of a listserv type thing of we can ask each other questions and try to do some innovating that way. But I always try to tell people in these forums too, and if you wouldn't mind adding this in the notes, I think it's important that people know how I see policing since I'm at least on November 7th of 2025, I'm the leader of the police department. And so something that really informed my vision for my time there is a website called thecurve.org. And you'll have to read all about, there's some really interesting things on there about how that organization came to be. It's not very old, but if you do any leadership reading, Simon Sinek is kind of a thought leader in the leadership realm. He did a lot of work in the private sector and then got really interested in the military, did a lot of work with the military on leadership, and then recognized that policing is probably 20 years behind generally when it comes to things. And so he really wanted to help us with that, thankfully. And so he convened a group of chiefs. Some of them are retired, some of them are still current chiefs, and started talking about how can we better professionalize and modernize the policing profession based on what policing looks like today. And a lot of that is breaking out of a lot of molds and talking more about officer wellness and mental health and what that looks like, and kind of the driving forces and things behind that are, the purpose of the police is to protect the vulnerable from harm. And we have that on our wall in the academy. That's our kind of our driving, theme, if you will. And then, what's the mission of the police? Well, to preserve life, to preserve peace, and to preserve property in that order. And when you think about that, interestingly enough, some of the old ways of talking about policing in the 80s and 90s, and we still use this because it has a practical application, but we talk about our life safety priorities in the SWAT world are hostages, innocent people, police officers, and then suspects. And so we beat that into their heads, because when you get that out of order, things go horribly wrong. An officer does not put themselves above innocent people and hostages. We can't put the suspect above any of those people because things get all out of whack. And so when we think about things in that framework of life, peace, property, it helps us reframe what we're supposed to be doing and what's most important in that moment. And so we really are trying to institute that. Another great advantage of having our own academy is we get to decide what that looks like. And so we teach the ICAP model of decision making, which is integrated communications and tactics through PERF, to try to get them thinking about what's the next logical step. Let's think through this problem. Let's reassess. Let's make some tactical decisions and take a step back and look at it again. Sometimes that's happening extremely rapidly, right? Not every situation I can take 10 minutes to sit here and think about, but just getting them in the mindset of that thought process is really important to not only their safety, but the people they're trying to protect. And that's really everybody. So if you want to know what kind of my worldview on policing, I would definitely look at that website. The Overland Park police chief, she's only been there about a year, but she's on that board. I got to talk to her recently at the Chiefs conference. And so we're going to do some more idea sharing about mentorship. So,
well, it is after 1. So I think we should probably thank you so much for your time. We were all caught up. All the questions online we answered. Thank you, guys. You've been great.
oh, thank you
for taking an hour out of your day.
No problem.
So just a quick question.
You guys made me feel really good about myself today. So I'm going to go into the weekend on a high
All
note,
right,
I
there you
think.
go.
We'll see.
What percentage of your population is now minority of some sort?
In the department?
Talking about her employees.
I would have to figure it. I think the last time I looked, if I combine both those groups together, I think we were around 12%, but don't quote me on that. That's a battle we're constantly fighting. I will say, I think it's gotten better. I think it's just from a personal perspective too. I don't have kids of my own. I have some amazing stepchildren that I've been in their lives for 15 years now. The first one just got married in September, so that was a great experience. But I think, especially trying to get women in the profession,
With the hours.
with the hours, and man, when I see my female officers that are having children and negotiating shift work and breastfeeding, and I mean, I literally don't know how they do it, and I don't know how they do it. So trying to figure out ways to support them in that and encourage that, because I do think women bring a different skill set to the job. I noticed, now I'm not a small statured person, but I even noticed, I mean, I dealt with some pretty hairy situations working night shift, but men had a very different reaction to me than they did to my male counterparts. Now, some people were just drunk or high and they're going to do what they're going to do, but I'm not immediately showing up and I'm not necessarily a challenge. It's not this male to male challenge. going on. And so it was a lot easier for me to de-escalate people through birds. And, you know, there is a certain percentage of men that just aren't going to lay hands on a woman. And so you use that to your advantage as well. But I think that's going to be, I think it's going to continue to be an uphill battle, because at some point it does, no matter what, I think feel like a choice, especially with the shift work part. So I think we've got some work to do on that front.
Of making the job appealing or doable to have a life.
Yeah,
And have a
absolutely.
job like that.
Absolutely. And I think too, you know, I'll tell you, some of the worst things I've ever heard, I've heard some pretty bad things said to police officers. And by far the worst things I've ever heard said were to African-American police officers that I worked with. And so I can't imagine that negotiating that.
In their community. And then,
Yes.
Yeah.
And so thankfully we've recruited some great, if you haven't met our school resource officer at Rockbridge High School, he's giant. He's gigantic, by the way. No, it is, you said that now.
I put you on the spot.
Dang it.
We just talked
It was
about names.
just a moment.
It'll come back.
It will, because I can see his face. He was a Division I wrestler that we recruited. And so, you know, like, but he's just, you hear him talk and you're like, oh my gosh, I wish he would read books on tape, because his voice is so, and he's so great with the kids, but man, I wouldn't wrestle him. I can tell you that much. But we've been able to recruit. We love athletes, especially because they get that teamwork environment. And so they tend to transition really well. We have a guy in the current academy class that was a pole vaulter at Ohio State University. We have a young man who came here from Mississippi. Him and his wife moved up here, and he played football for Coach Prime down at Jackson State. So we're getting some very good. Now, it's kind of funny to watch people interact with him. And I have one of my stepdaughters goes to college in Mississippi, so I'm down there with some frequency. He has a very, very thick Mississippi accent. And so sometimes people look at him and they're like, they'll look at me like the other cop, like, can you translate that? So I know what he's saying, but we used to have 2, now we have 1 officers from the United Kingdom. Recruiting is an uphill battle, but I'm hoping, I have a core belief too, that the more people can see themselves doing that job, the easier it is to go, hey, I can do that. It's kind of like my job. Now I feel like at least now somebody behind me could go, oh, she did that. I could do that as a woman. You know, that's not that's not off the deep end for me to think I could do that job. So
Maybe your pole vaulter could pass the bike.
I told him after he got hired, I said, I can't wait to watch your body worn camera videos the first time somebody runs from you. So I will say real quick too, you know, technology is another thing that is going to be a constant conversation.
Oh, right. We didn't even talk about flock cameras.
And so, you know, I think it's really important as a community that we talk about. I told somebody the other day on the radio that if we can't just bury our heads in the sand and go, no technology, like that's going to hurt recruiting. It's going to hurt, you know, solvability rates of crimes and things like that. But we have to be mindful. And that's one of the reasons, you know, I got asked a lot about facial recognition in the beginning. It's a big conversation. And my response at the time was, we have to be able to feel confident that there's a higher degree of confidence in the technology. And even with the flock cameras, it's a requirement that even if the camera says, oh, this license plate's stolen, the officer has to physically confirm that as well. So they can't just rely on the camera. But when you look at things like drones as first responders, which a lot of communities are moving in that direction, there are huge advantages for the safety, not only of the officer, but of the public, because you're almost going to potentially put some police pursuits out of business. Because you don't have to chase those cars. There's a drone watching and they get great crystal clear video of the person when they get out of the car. And so there is a degree of working smarter, not harder, but there's a balance that we're going to have to strike. And I think those will be tough conversations at times, but I think it's important that we have those conversations.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
One time I was talking to Jeff.
we're gonna let Jill transition out
They
and we're
have
gonna move to some
overhead
announcements by
looking at-
Pam.
And then they have
Big
shoot and stop.
Take your